Hey everyone. Today I got a chance to sit down and talk with Kamil Rextin, the GM over at 42 Agency out of Toronto. They specialize in helping B2B SaaS companies scale with a focus on paid media and marketing ops, both topics that are really sort of near and dear to my heart if you've been a listener for any period of time. So, this was really a great discussion. We got a chance to nerd out on some of the things like setting the stage with the right ops and really diving into which specific KPIs that you'll want to measure against and how marketers can make decisions based on the wrong data and how to avoid it. So let's get into it. So, Kamil, it's great having you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, so it's funny, like we've had like lots of interactions in the past, but we've never had you on the show. So this will be, I think, really fruitful for everybody listening. For anybody who's not familiar with you or your agency,
Oh,
maybe you can just really
you froze
quickly
up on me.
talk a little bit about what you do.
Sorry, you froze up on me. I don't know what's going on with my internet.
Okay, so we can edit that part out.
Yeah.
So I was just going to say, for anybody who's listening that maybe is not super familiar with you, maybe you can give a little bit of background on you and your agency and what you guys focus on.
Yeah, sure, for sure. So I've been in B2B SaaS, demand gen, marketing ops for around 12 years now in-house, and then started the agency 4 years ago. We're primarily focused on helping B2B SaaS companies with paid media and marketing ops. So we focus on those two things. We don't do content. We don't do any of the SEO stuff.
So paid media and marketing ops, two things that are pretty close to my heart, near and dear. And we've had conversations in the past here recently too about what like how impactful those things are in an organization where they're trying to scale, right? Because typically what
Yeah.
happens is companies are trying to grow, marketers are trying to move really fast, they are trying to hit pipeline and revenue, and more often than not it's the infrastructure and the reporting and the things that are sort of you think of as like your utilities that the business
Yeah.
runs on, the marketing business
I
runs
call it the
on.
plumbing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it provides friction to scale. So maybe talk a little bit about that. Obviously you work with clients all the time, and these are some of the things that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
How are you seeing that? And then what are the things that you're looking at when you get into a business?
Yeah, so the way I think about it is that there's technical debt on the product side. So if you don't do right things the first time, they're gonna come bite you, and you'll have to redo a lot of stuff. So there's similarly, I think there's marketing debt on the marketing side, but it's not often talked about.
Yes.
An example is if you're, I don't know, like your tracking isn't set up right, your opportunity stages are all messed up, and then you hire four AEs on top of that,
Yeah.
then that entire process is broken. It's like trying to fix it while flying the plane at the same time, and it's just
Yeah.
going to create more friction down the line. You won't have the proper reporting. There's no process set. The systems are not set up to operate the way you operate the business. And the
Yeah.
business has to come first, and the system has to map to what the business process is. And one of the challenges that I've seen is that there's not a lot of clear definition on these things, and nobody sat down and thought through what the process should look like. And they just like AEs starting creating leads in Salesforce, and nobody knows where they came from, and they don't have all the information. The data is not clean, and then when you try to report on that, you're getting garbage in, garbage out. So the earlier and the better you do this right, the easier it is to scale up your programs as you go.
So I don't think there isn't like a single marketer that is listening to this and isn't nodding their head right along with you, because that's exactly what we all sort of feel, right? That's the pain that we all live through. And it's funny how you said this, right? You said, like there's sort of marketing tech debt, just like there is, within your application or on the dev side or the engineering side. So I think, to me, that is the one thing that is this hidden cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
That lives sort of on the balance sheet somewhere, that is accumulating over time, right? We typically depreciate, right? But there's a
Yep.
there's a cost associated or an expense associated with this. And so how do you talk about this to, let's say, either a marketing exec or even like a non-marketing exec that, like a
Yep.
CFO? Like how do you articulate this? How do you talk about it to get them
Yeah.
to sort of understand?
So the first thing I say is there's no direct ROI to having a good marketing ops, sales ops practice. Like it's not something that's going to help you generate revenue, but it's going to streamline your revenue engine. So it's going to streamline how the team works. It's going to streamline the go-to-market engine for your team. So it's about understanding what works, what doesn't work. It's about understanding how the team is performing against targets. It's about understanding where people get stuck in the funnel. It's about understanding how your opportunity stages are set up. So it's all those things combined that result in building this. I call it the plumbing. You can't live in a house if it doesn't have good plumbing. So you need to have all these data pipes connected. You need to have clean data in. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to scale up the marketing. So there's no like there was a question on this on Twitter or somewhere where somebody asked like, what's the direct? Well, how do I convince somebody of the ROI of having a good marketing operations function? And I'm like, there is no direct ROI to having a good marketing
Yeah.
operations function. It's not inherently. It's not going to help you generate more revenue, but it's going to help you streamline how you generate revenue. And it's more of an enablement function than anything else. But as you scale up, you start to feeling those pain points because now you went from one marketer to 10 marketers, and you had one campaign in flight to like having 20 campaigns in flight, and you have no visibility on what's going on. And then that creates issues. And a very basic example is like this is like years ago. I was talking to somebody. They're like, "Oh, our bounce rate on our site is 0%." I'm like, "That's completely impossible. Something must be going on." But they had for 6 months they had operated on the assumption that the bounce rate, like it's not an important metric at the end of the day. Like I don't care about bounce rate, but it's like one of those things where they're like, "Oh, bounce rate is 0%. Like our rebrand is successful. People are not bouncing off our site." Like, look at this. You have two GA codes firing on the same site at the same time. That is why your bounce rate is 0%.
Yeah.
So if you don't have that tidied up, you're operating under false assumptions, and that can create issues as you scale up.
Yeah, so you're making decisions based on the wrong data, and
Right.
ultimately you set yourself up for failure, right, over time, because you
Yeah.
start going down
Yeah.
the wrong path. You have to reverse. It hurts your
Yeah.
credibility, right? When you're trying to
Yeah.
report on something. And I think that's the thing to me is, I talk to agencies, I talk to marketers, every week, and one of the things that I typically get is, okay, look, yeah, I know my data is not as perfect as it needs to be, and that sort of thing. But really, at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is, like, if I'm close enough and I can make good decisions, I want to be able to make those decisions, right? So there's always a
Yeah.
trade-off, right? It's like a
Yeah.
Pareto
Yeah.
rule, 80-20, to get
Yeah.
the key things
100%.
in place so that you can get,
Yeah.
you can get moving and have that forward momentum,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then carve out some time to be able to dedicate, just like you do in product, right? Just like you invest in, there's a certain amount of engineering time that's always dedicated to maintaining and tech debt, and bringing your product current, and that has to happen here. But we don't, if as marketers, we don't think that way. Traditionally, we have not thought that way. So
Yeah.
this is an interesting topic, and I look at it like it shows up in so many different ways, right? I did a post on LinkedIn about this, I don't know, a few days ago, where I was talking about, how not having this done, like what to look out for, like what are the leading indicators, what starts to materialize when you're facing this problem and maybe you don't even know, right?
Yeah.
And it starts showing up as like your reporting starts slowing down, and you're always
Yeah.
behind on trying to get something to your, to the executives, or,
Yeah.
your head count has to go up by one in marketing ops or sales ops because they're doing more and more things behind the scenes to keep things patchwork together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the type of activity to be able to execute on a campaign slows down because you're
Yeah.
not able to move as quickly as you need to. So these are all
Yeah.
things that are leading indicators that like really keep you from sort of having the efficiency to move forward and
Correct.
sort of
Yeah.
execute.
100%.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And it's sorry, I was just gonna say that it's sort of like it's one of those things where you can't get the insights you want out of it. So to find those insights, you're like, I don't even know where to look. Like I don't know if this data is being tracked anywhere. So and that's an issue.
Well, to me, just running teams over the years, like one of the things that I would always sort of experience when I would, come into a new role is, wow, like I just inherited this entire MarTech stack. Maybe I wouldn't have chosen this or
Yeah.
this, right? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I got that, and then I've got, all of these things that are sort of disjointed that I'm patchworking together or duct taping together. And there is a bit of slow down before you speed up.
Yeah.
But I would also argue that, like, it's not as complicated as we try to make it. You know what I mean? Like we very much love to like as marketers, we love to try out new
Yes.
tools, and we don't like
Yes.
we call it testing. For anybody who's listening to the podcast and not the video, I'm putting that in air quotes. We call it testing, but ultimately we're marketers. We like shiny new things, and
Yeah.
we have this thing where we tend to overcomplicate the core metrics that we really need to focus on. And I'm particularly talking about B2B marketers in this particular conversation. So what are the types of KPIs that you would look at that we would really need to be honing in on, right? And so they're like, obviously all of the data that's coming in, I can measure basically everything, but then there are only those core things that really
Yeah.
matter. What would you sort of point to, for
I mean,
somebody who's
there's
in B2B marketing that's running sort of like a demand gen program or something for
I think there's some leading indicators, there's some lagging indicators. So like leading indicators is like how much your conversion by source, conversion by campaign, that kind of stuff. And lagging is more time to close, pipeline velocity, opportunities created by source, stuff like that.
Yep.
But I think ultimately it has to tie into the business KPIs, and like most businesses, like I feel like there's a part of the argument that I have is
Yep.
marketers like to operate in their own vacuum and talk about XYZ, but the business and the CFOs like doesn't care about that. They care about these things right over here. So like we need to connect the two dots together.
That's right.
And I don't think as marketers we work enough or closely enough with our finance. Like the CFO has a pulse on the business. Go ask them like what's going. They'll model it out for you. Like go work with the finance team because they're like full of smart people. And I feel like marketers like to say, oh, this is not like, yes, part of it is not quantifiable, but it's what is quantifiable, you should be measuring that. So you're not completely flying blind and you have an idea of where you're going.
So what's interesting is Stefan Hildebrand, he's got a product, and anyway, he did a post where he was talking about something to the effect of like, marketers like to sort of like rename things over and over again.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, and in this particular case, he was talking about an MQL, right? It's like,
yeah.
Well, you know what? We like to use the word high intent today, but really high intent is just
that's what an MQL is.
It's just an MQL, like, And so what's
at the end of the day,
yeah. And what I said is like I agree with that 100%, right? Like we like to relabel things, but I also think that maybe doesn't put the onus on us as marketer. Like it almost like shifts the blame a little bit because. And what I mean by that is like there are two reasons to me why this sort of thing happens, right? So, yes, we like to rename things, but it's also when we talk to executives, non-marketing executives especially, we have a hard time being accountable, right? And we like to shift the goalposts, and we like to maybe not intentionally, but we like to shift the goalposts a little or the target a little bit, and we like to relabel things. And it's easier for us to work around in the squishy middle than it is to just be upfront and say, look, this is what I'm measuring against. This is why it matters. And this is what we should be paying attention to. And that sort of that element is, I think, super important.
Yeah.
I think the second thing is, marketers have a really hard time articulating to the CFO, to your point, what it is that the KPIs are and why they matter, right?
Yeah.
And they also we also have a hard time articulating and show, and there's a certain level of critical thinking that goes into building a strategy And if we
Yeah.
just sort of like follow a playbook, we've skipped the critical thinking part about why it is that we're the underlying why
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
why
Totally
that
agree.
strategy is being built in the first place. And so
Yeah.
ultimately, we can't back up our statements when we make them to somebody who asks us even like the remotest of like deep, like one layer deep question, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Anything that's beyond the surface level. And you get a lot of like, to me, it's like, if you can't do that, then, and you can't talk about how, to your point, how your marketing activities are tying directly to pipeline and revenue, right? So it should be basically two things. It should be like, our job is to tell the story, brand story,
Yeah.
and to drive pipeline and revenue. Those are the
And
two
I would
things that we
argue
should be
the
really doing.
brand story is your long-term bet on driving pipeline, and the short-term bets on driving pipeline. Like, to me, there's
100%.
it's a
Yeah.
60 to 40, 80, 20, whatever you call it. But
Right.
I think part of the issue is us marketers like to argue amongst ourselves about, oh, is it called demand gen? Is it called growth marketing? Is it called growth? Like, we
Yes.
can't even agree on the definition of marketing
Yes.
itself.
Yes.
And then we start arguing about, and everybody wants to like have their
Yes.
own. And then, like, going back to the MQL example, MQL is your best guess at this lead shows certain behavior
Yeah.
demographics that's going to convert to revenue.
Yeah.
That's all essentially it is.
Yeah.
Should the CFO be reporting, like, should the CMO be reporting to the board on MQLs? No. Should the marketing team be looking at them as a leading indicator? Maybe, because if your sales cycle is 6 months long, you want some leading indicators that you're rowing in the right direction before
That's
they
right.
actually convert it, or 12 months, or whatever it is.
That's right.
If it's a 30-day sales cycle, boom, they buy and you're done,
Yes.
and you don't need like a sophisticated demand waterfall model.
Yes.
But if in that 12 months there's so many drop-off points, so it helps to have those milestones, MQL, SQL opportunity, whatever you call it, PQL for, whatever.
Yes.
It just helps to understand what those stages are. So you're like, oh, my opportunities are down. What's the root cause? Oh, my MQL to SQL, whatever stage. That something's broken there. It used to be 20%, now it's 5%.
Yep.
So I look at it like more of a diagnosis tool rather than like, I think the argument, I'm sorry, I'm going off track a little bit, but the argument about MQLs is like sort of baseless in the way, because the idea is essentially, hey, these people are showing certain behaviors, they fit our ideal customer. It's 80% likely they'll convert into revenue in 6 months from now. Like,
yeah,
I think there's,
yeah,
sorry, I went off on a
100%
rant.
agree with
I
that.
apologize.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that too, because I think, we do get stuck into this. We need more NQLs, we need more leads, we need more, whatever. And so we go into this scenario where, we oscillate. There's this tremendous pressure to oscillate back and forth between what we know works and what we don't. And the oscillation, like there's an opportunity cost to that, right? Going back and forth and not staying true to the strategy. And the reason why like we struggle with that in an organization is because we have external pressure, right? Or internal pressure even, right? So, it's like, well, we should do this. We should, there's another campaign, or, there's second guessing or whatever. So again, I sort of go back to like, it's our job. Half of our job is like, I was talking to another CMO about this at a different company. I don't know. I want to say two weeks ago, where we were talking about like half of our job is doing the stuff, right? Executing really well.
Yeah.
And the other half is communicating the strategy internally to make sure that we continue to move things forward, and that there's buy-in, and that that this is the right thing. And you can't do that without, the aforementioned KPIs that you were talking about. So I think it's sort of the whole, we come full circle with that, but I like what you were saying. So I had a question just really quickly. The way that you typically work, you're mostly, within, for anybody who's not familiar with your agency, you're primarily focusing on B2B, right? These are B2B companies, and you get some big logos that are under your belt. I'm kind of curious, like when you talk to them, how do you articulate, first of all, how do you communicate, and how do you articulate your strategy for what I'm assuming you're calling demand generation, or frankly, just really good marketing, right? For B2B, even if you didn't
Yeah.
put a label on it. Like,
Yeah.
how do you,
Yeah,
how
that's
do
a
you
good
start
question.
that organization, or how do you set
I mean,
the table?
a lot of people will come to us and they'll be like, okay, I have a problem. I'm not hitting my pipeline goals. We need to accelerate it. Or a lot of people are like, okay, I have this problem. I don't know what the issue is. And then we sort of dig into it. But I came back to this principle of there's 10% of your market who knows who you are and the rate to buy. But for that 10% of market, you and 10 other competitors are trying to reach them at the same time, the people who are showing active intent. But then there's 90% of the market that doesn't even know you have a problem. They have a problem, or there's like they're just sitting there. They're happy with the status quo. And our job is to convert that 10% in a very direct response, whatever you want to call it, fashion, and then also tell the bigger story to that 90% of the market who might not be in market for a solution like yours in the next 6 months, but
Yeah,
they might be in the next 12 months or 2 years.
that's right.
So you wanna stay on top of mind on those, and I think that sort of encapsulates our entire strategy in a way. Like our strategy is start with the bottom of the funnel because that's the piece that is closest to revenue, and that
Yeah,
buys you time to try the other stuff. If you're
yeah,
not paying the bills, nobody's gonna give you enough runway to try a brand campaign because you have to first make sure you're paying the bills.
that's right.
Once you start paying the bills, then you start moving more into the whatever have you, brand stuff or whatever have you. But I think it's important to keep a balance between the two because otherwise, you and 20 other competitors and whoever else is competing for that very small slice of the pie, and there's only so much there that's like you're going to be scraping the bottom of the barrel in a very very broad sense. It's like for sure, like you won't run out of volume there for the next 6 months, 12 months, but you will eventually hit a point where you and everybody else is sort of fighting for the same kind of people.
Yeah,
And then when we take this and then we tie it with the MOPS piece, which is this is what we do on the front end of the house. That's how I sort of articulated. Like this, the front end of the house, which is more customer facing, and then on the back end, we're trying to build systems to capture those people, move them to the right place, make sure they're being acted on, make sure they're reported on, making sure you're attributing correctly to your effort. And when I say attribution, I'm meaning that in a very broad sense. I'm not going to go into like U versus W versus there's like a whole can of worms there. But like on a very basic sense, like we know who they are, where they came from, and how they're moving down the funnel.
yeah.
And we can tie back the activity on the front of the house to the back of the house, which is more like the pipeline revenue, whatever have you.
So when you move up funnel into awareness channels, what are you typically looking for there? So you've got, let's say you've got your basic blocking and tackling that are already, that are sort of in place, lower funnel,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, wiring, routing leads correctly, making sure there's
Yeah,
follow up, like all the, basic blocking and tackling, retargeting, right? You got paid
yeah,
search
yeah,
dialed in. Now you
yeah.
start moving upwards into paid social. Like what do you typically look for there? Obviously, there's demand capture, and obviously, like figuring out like the other 90%, like you were saying, right? How do
Yeah, yeah,
you how
yeah.
do you how do you reach those people? How do you talk
There's
to those people?
two ways. There's like third party audience tools we use where we sort of build out your ICP profiles and we just load them up and we want to make sure our message get in front of them. It might be video, it might be ungated content, it might be pure engagement visits, whatever, impression based stuff. Or it might be that we have your market is broader, but we are getting a chunk. We're tackling it chunk by chunk. So we say, okay, first we're going to go after segment X. Let's try and our best to like encapsulate your. I don't think we can ever capture the total addressable market, but let's try and capture the most what we can. So it might be our market. We sell to people who use Salesforce as the CRM and blah blah blah, and they're this company size, this industry, blah blah. We can build to a reasonable amount. We can build a list of those accounts that exist in that universe, and then it's our job to make sure that our messages are getting across. And I think this is like just on the paid social side, but there has to be other stuff around it for this to work because I don't think each channel just exists in its own isolation and it can
Sure.
drive like you have to have other stuff around that helps paid social. I think I always say like paid helps amplify what you have already. Like Emily Kramer, who's ex head of marketing at Asana, she has this great saying of like engine versus fuel.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
paid is like the fuel, but you need paid is like the engine, but you need the fuel to put into it. So like
Yeah.
you should have good organic, you should have good content, you should have a good brand, you should have all that, understand who your ideal customer is. And we sort of come in and help accelerate that. I don't know if that answers your question, but let me know if you can.
It no, it does actually, because ultimately what happens is, when you pour the fuel on, right, you've got again, you got your basic blocking and tackling pretty well dialed in, and now you need to create or widen, what's going
Yeah,
on, right? And so that, that behavior, or sort of the tactics that you're typically using to be able to create that is going to be things like paid social and other areas. And
yeah,
I think nowhere in the history, like somebody can try to, like, they can message in or comment if they want, but I'm going to make a fairly decent statement that is, nowhere in the history of marketing have you been able to dial in and get so granular with your targeting as you
yeah,
can today, right?
yeah, yeah,
And the opportunity is massive for the marketers that really do know how to do this, and getting to a point where, I sort of equate it to like SEO based, like, specificity. So, like
yeah,
I remember, like, 10 years ago, like, I would spend a lot of time in content marketing, and I would focus very clearly on keywords that really
yeah, yeah,
I knew was
yeah,
gonna, be high intent keywords once I got some sort of ranking, right? And
yeah,
then, like, but now I don't need to do that, right? Like, now, I mean, well, let me rephrase. It's not an either or proposition. It's actually a both and
yeah,
proposition.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
still
yeah,
going to
yeah,
do that, right? I'm
yeah,
still going to do that because I want to capture that. But also at the same time, there's like a way to accelerate it.
yeah,
And, you do that by, sort of dialing in, like, within, like a true firmographically, fit
yeah,
ICP, right? You've got the right kind of targeting that allows you to be able to expose people that may be or may not yet be in market, right, to your
yeah,
product in a much faster way, right? In the
yeah,
past,
yeah.
that would have to be like 6 months later, and like I
They're
built the
still sitting
page
there
and it was
waiting
just
for the
like,
SEO. Yeah.
it's just crickets, right? You got like six people on the site. Like, it takes a long time to build that up, but you
Yeah,
can, to your point earlier, like, you can pour some gas on it, right? And really
yeah,
accelerate it and get that kind of, that momentum that you need,
yeah,
instead of it being 6 months, it's in a shorter period of time. So
yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah.
so what are the types of, I always like to ask this question because it's like marketers seem to like it. They always want to know, it's like, what is everybody
We
else
love silver
using?
bullets. We love silver bullets.
We do, right? Yeah. Well, it's like, we also love, like, to have, like, the inside view of, like, what other
Yeah,
marketers are doing and what
yeah,
they're using in their tech stack. So, what
yeah,
do you typically see? Like, I'm just going to say, like, a really smart, well-designed tech stack, MarTech stack,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
for clients. Like, what do they need to have?
So this is going to be controversial because you work for a competitor, but
No, it's fine. It's fine.
we 90% of the time it's HubSpot and Salesforce. I
Uh-huh.
think that's the core stack that's in place.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that, I have no love for Podot. I think Salesforce bought Podot and really killed the product, and it has seen no innovation in the past 10 years.
Yeah.
And I've been using HubSpot and Podot for the past 10, 15 years. So like I've seen them evolve, and HubSpot's come a long way.
Yeah.
Podot is still like, and the irony is that Podot sync with Salesforce is so bad that HubSpot sync is actually much better than Podot sync in their own way. Anyway, that's the core focus. And I always say, like, you need CRM and marketing automation to be the backbone of your sales and marketing, because if that's not there, you don't have anything else. I
Right.
will say that this is more in mid-market enterprise. In the more of the bottoms up freemium, I'm going to put in quotes, PLG, there's more like intercom segment, which are, I think, becoming more common. But there's intercom segment, first party, which is a new product, inflection.io. It was started by ex Marketo guy, which is more like a next gen marketing automation for product led growth. I'm going to put that in quotes, because there's such high volume of users that tools like HubSpot and Salesforce, the price is so prohibitive if you
Yeah.
have tens of millions of users,
Yeah.
but you're not quite in that Salesforce Marketing Cloud or B2C stuff.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you can have stuff like I mean, there's I'm not a huge fan of like purpose-built ABM tools like Terminus and stuff because I just don't buy into their philosophy. But there's like some room to be something to be said for tools like Chili Piper, which help with the routing stuff. Something to be said for like free tools like Google Optimize that helps you personalize at scale. So like you don't even need to have like a Tribly or whatever
Yeah.
have you. You can just use Google Optimize and like. And
Yeah.
then there's always the data enrichment stuff that I think is pretty critical right now, like Zoom Info, Clearbit, things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. What's funny is like you started off the conversation. You're like, "Hey, this might be a little bit controversial. Like, like you're a HubSpot shop," and honestly, it doesn't bother me one way or the other. Like, I think the show, like we've probably demonstrated this in episodes. Like people like that have been listening for a while kind of know this,
Yeah.
but like I don't care. Like what I care
Yeah, I
about is like
know.
what is the marketer need to be able to do their jobs. And look, I'll be happy to stack SharpSpring up against HubSpot and everything else. Like HubSpot's a great product,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
you know, I have zero problem comparing what we do to what they do, um, because we solve some similar use cases and we also solve
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's
some
there's some
different ones.
overlap, but
But
there's like
yeah,
yeah.
we have specificity, and and I think there's a real, I think, need that marketers have, like to. I by the way, I loved what you just said. It's like, okay, like these are the things that you kind of want, and then these are the things that maybe you want to stay away from, and then you gave a couple of reasons why, because
Might get some hate mail for that, but
well, yeah, but at the same time, it's like a lot of marketers, they do get mesmerized by the shiny thing, and then
yeah.
they lose sight of like what's really important. Because I said this, the other day. I was like marketing really, like the tools and everything else should serve your goals and your objectives, not the other way around, right? And a
Yes.
lot of times
Yes.
we do that. We build our own trap that we then have to operate within. And
Yeah.
so you
Yeah. Yeah.
need something that allows you to be able to do where everything talks together, right? There
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
all of the data is sort of like organized and normalized, allows you to be able to get to it so that you can, you can report upwards to your boss or what have you,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and do all of those things so that it's agile enough so that you can go and execute
Yeah.
really well at a high pace. And
100%.
yeah, and and I think that's just it's interesting, like some of the tools that allow for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and like there's like you can add like, and I posted about this on LinkedIn, and I love Clearbit, I love Metadata. I think there's value in what they do, but if you're not spending like 20-30K a month on
Yeah.
paid social, you don't need that. Like there's just there's no value in those tools.
Yeah.
And there's like the Sixth Sense and all that, and I think they have a place. And I know people who work at Sixth Sense, they probably listen to this and they'll send me some hate messages on this, but I think ABM needs to start with the foundation of sales and marketing working together, understanding like there's a lot of stuff that needs to go in before you need to bring in a tech to like dark funnel, whatever you have, you like, I don't know what the hell, but I think there's value to that. And I talk but like I'm not convinced that intent data from Sixth Sense is better than a randomized me guessing out of my target account list who's gonna rate. Like I'm not there yet. And there's like people who drop 50K on it and they'll put a junior marketer in front of them. They're like, oh, we're doing ABM. And I'm like, this is not ABM. Like your sales and marketing are not even aligned with the same accounts. Like what? You're running very expensive ads on LinkedIn and display to these target accounts, which you could do through custom audiences and not have to. This is controversial. So if you want to edit it out, please do.
Yeah. I liked it because I mean it's an unvarnished opinion on how you're seeing things work, as opposed to sort of just buying in without validating. And so obviously you have clients that are using it and you can see sort of what's working, what's not working, and I think it's valid. I think it's a valid point.
Thank you.
So it's interesting. We talk a lot about this, and sometimes what I like to do is, and I know we're sort of coming up on time here, but I always like to sort of flip the discussion a little bit. Typically, it's I ask a bunch of questions and you know, give the response. And maybe if we flip it around really quickly, and I know I'm putting
Yeah,
you on the spot here, but do you have
yeah,
any questions for me that, you are
yeah.
particularly
Oh yeah,
interested
so
in,
many.
something that I can help answer or whatever? I don't know.
I guess my first question is, how do you view the balance between demand and like I don't. So I'll say brand. I don't believe we create demand as a marketer. I think the demand is in the market. We don't like nobody wakes up and sees an ad and says, "Oh, I want this thing." Like that's
Yeah.
existing behavior. But how do you balance between like brand, like short term versus long term, brand versus demand, direct response versus brand? Like how do you view that equation in the work you do?
And with regards to budget, with regards to like just
Focus,
strategy, like, yeah, okay.
strategy, and focus. Like
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I think it depends on how aggressive your number is, to be honest with you. Like, like what
yeah,
is,
yeah, yeah.
and it starts. I'm actually going to answer my question, or answer your question with something you said earlier, which is
Yeah,
it starts at the business level, right? At the end of
yeah,
the
yeah,
day, they're setting the number, and marketing ought to have a seat at the table and help determine what that is. But ultimately, like, there's a business objective, X% growth, number of new
yeah,
deals,
yeah,
however you want
yeah,
to
yeah,
translate it. And then that should map back to, what your campaigns are running, like whatever you're doing.
yeah, 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 100%. Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, and so if there's a significant appetite, for the business to invest in brand over the long term, you're going to see that show up, and you're going to, it is a non-direct response, for lack of a better word, demand gen line item that is part
yeah,
of the overall marketing mix and the spend. And so it does come back to the objective. And if it's fairly short term, it's going to err, you're going to sort of lean
yeah,
towards the things that are actually
yeah,
going to
yeah.
produce, those quarterly results, or what have you. But yeah, and I'm lucky enough to be, in a position where we think holistically over the long term,
Yeah,
where,
yeah,
in my job, that's I get it, it's as much about pipeline and revenue. Like, you have that discussion a lot, but it's also like, what is the impact to the brand? Like, what are we doing over the long term, as we
yeah,
think about constant contact? So
yeah, 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 yeah. And second question for you: what's the one thing about B2B marketing that's popular today that kind of really bugs you the wrong? Like you're like you might disagree with, you might be like, that's
well, this is going to be one of those things. So I have a problem with marketers who don't know how to articulate
yeah,
what the goal is, and they
yeah,
sort of just
okay,
repeat what's happening on social or else, talking heads
right,
or
right, right, right,
whatever.
right, yeah, 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 yeah,
Not because, like, I don't have a problem with them. I just have a problem with the concept, right? And this goes back to really fundamentally, like, critically thinking about how to solve a problem and knowing how to address it, articulate it, right? Defend it, right? In a
yeah,
conversation. Because if you can't do that, then it wasn't the right strategy to begin with. And you're
right,
just sort of like, it's like checking off the boxes. That's why, like, playbooks are great, but if you don't understand the why underneath it, like, the playbooks don't, they only get you so far. And so, like,
yeah,
I genuinely, like, the pet peeve is, like, strive to be more than just the playbook, right? Strive to understand the
right, right,
why
right, right,
underneath it, and
yeah.
know how to defend the strategy.
Yeah, yeah. I think what you said reminds me of the infamous Airbnb story of Craigslist, and everybody's like, "Oh, that was awesome. Let's do it for our business." I'm like, "But you're not Airbnb. Like, why would you do that? You're not."
100%. 100%. I love that.
Last question for you. You're in a very, I think one of the most competitive spaces. How does that impact your go to market? Like, are you? I mean, I won't like email marketing, constant contact. There's like Mailchimp. There's like I think huge market as well. Like there's so many different use cases. You can
Yeah.
sub niche. You can. I'm not a fan of. I don't know if where you this might be a follow up, but like I'm not a fan of category creation. I'm more a fan of like take a sub niche of the market and own that versus like trying to create a new market itself.
Yeah.
But how does your go to market like sort of play out in yeah, open question. Like you're in a competitive space. Like project management is a competitive space. Email marketing, marketing automation is a competitive space. There's like big players, there's small players.
Yeah.
How do you sort of handle that?
I think it's a great question, and it's really timely because I just got done talking with a brand team 4 or 5 hours ago, and they were asking, like, how do we think about, the SharpSpring product, within the context of Constant Contact, right? Like, how do we think about
Yeah.
that? And one of the comments that I made was like, I don't think we want to go and be like, we're not going to be Monday, right? Where we just go and
Yeah.
drop
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
ridiculous amounts of money to try to like
Yeah.
buy the space, right? Um, and look, that's a strategy, and it obviously works if
Yeah.
if you want to take that route. I think, but for us, we need to get really crystal clear about who we are in our category in the category that we're in, because there is a real need for marketing automation and CRM, right?
Yeah.
If you go to G2, there is a very clear category for marketing automation and a very clear
Yeah.
category for CRM. What I say, when I talk about our narrative and how we think about our customers and what their pain points are, it's like, I want to be the thing that ties those two worlds together. And and so when I think about, marketing automation and a marketing team that needs to deliver MQLs over to a sales team that then are going to close, when I think about that from like a demand gen perspective, right? I want to know holistically all the way through the funnel from beginning to end. I want to be able to tell the whole story, not just my little marketing siloed piece.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
vice versa, right? I want to have a sales leader counterpart, which I'm really lucky to have on our team in Greg Bond. He, the thing that he is seeing is like a tool, because we eat our own dog food, right? We use
Right. Yeah.
SharpSpring as the
Yeah.
customer. And so when we meet on a weekly basis every Wednesday, one of the things that we talk about is, what does the pipeline look like holistically? And he's talking about as many marketing things, related items,
Right. Right.
as
Right.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about in
Yeah.
the pipeline and in the CRM.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you're like, and that to me is like the power of sort of what we do,
Yeah.
is like,
Yes.
it ties everything together all, under one roof.
Yeah.
And, yes, like, lots of sales leaders don't want to give up their Salesforce instance, right? That's what their sales team knows.
Oh my God. Yes.
Totally get it, and then it's fine.
Yeah.
We play nicely with, with Salesforce and other integrations too. But my point is like, like, if I want to really dive deep into the campaigns that I'm running as a marketing leader that are going to generate pipeline and revenue, and then communicate that to a sales leader, I want to be able to see that visually. Like, I want to be able to see that
Yes.
through
Yes.
the
Yes.
through the life of the lead. So
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's sort of my take on it. But it's a super competitive space. It's a good question.
Yeah, and like and try getting a market. It's probably a bad joke, but try getting a market into Salesforce. They just don't want to go into it. Like, they just like, just keep me away from
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that's right. I mean,
And
and it's a great question, because I think people who are coming in and looking for a CRM solution are not necessarily the same people who are coming in and looking for a marketing automation solution, right? And so we have to
yeah,
address both, but we also have to
yeah,
be able to operate, within the ecosystem too. So, somebody described our product as like a Swiss Army knife, right? You can sort of
yeah.
pick and choose what you want to do, but we're not going to force you into one thing or the other. So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Is there, and this is, sorry, we might be up for time, but like, do you see yourself playing in a specific sub niche of the market, or are you like, MailChimp is super SMB, ConvertKit is for bloggers? Like, do you see SharpSpring within the context of Salesforce and Marketo and all that, which are like maybe to enterprise? Are you like,
Yeah.
are you trying to capture like a specific subsegment of the market, or are you also trying to like, and just you don't have to like go specifically, but are you also trying to go up market and go after the big guys, so to speak?
Yeah. I actually, I don't know the answer to that. I have thoughts on it, and I have opinions, but I think one of
Yeah.
the things that we are talking, one of the things I'm really particularly proud of over the last couple of months, 3 months, is the fact that we're working as sales and marketing so much closer to product and
Yeah.
engineering. Um, and I really like the fact that we're getting in and we're having those deeper conversations,
Yeah.
and product is asking, sales and marketing, hey, what do we see? Like, what data do we have? What do we see, right? That we can then inform,
Yeah.
um, more importantly, like what the product needs to go and solve. So I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
more to
Yeah.
come on that, to be honest, but it's
Yeah.
a great question.
Yeah. I love that.
We're
Yeah.
in the
No.
middle of it
Yeah. I
now,
love.
talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was great.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I guess, for anybody who's been listening and, is, sort of thinking about, some of the stuff that you're talking about, and obviously you have a really deep knowledge in both marketing ops, demand gen, et cetera. Like, how would somebody get a hold of you if they wanted to ask you some questions or learn more?
Twitter is the best place. I'm always on Twitter at Kamil Rextin, and we also have a newsletter that we send out once in a while. It's very irregular. It's like when inspiration strikes. It's 42slash.com. So 42 the number and slash.com. And we
Nice.
write like some of the essays we write there. We write about like intent data, why it's not. And I got into one of my friends runs an intent data company, and we had a very heated episode about that. But like if you want the hot takes, that's where they live, are on Twitter.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I think I need to go back. I need to go subscribe to it. That sounds pretty cool.
Appreciate it.
All right. Well, cool. Well, hey, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. I know we're up on time, and we need to do this again here soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye.